Apparently, installing Arch is quite a task. Well, I'm Troubleshoot, and today I'm going to show you it's actually incredibly easy and literally just one command, one word to get it done. I've fired into the Arch installer here on a virtual machine, but you could of course be using bare metal. The installation steps are exactly the same. First of all, you'll want to make sure that you have internet. If you have an Ethernet connection, perfect. If you have Wi-Fi, it's a bit of a different task. You'll need to run a few commands, and you'll find a link for that down in the description below. To double check you have internet, I'll be pinging, using ping, let's say google.com. If you see a response, then great, you're connected to the internet. Now, the actual install command, this is very complicated. Follow along closely. We'll be typing in Arch install, and that's it. Hit enter. It'll fire up the install script built in with every Arch installer distribution, and in here we have a very simple interface to set up our system. We'll be using the arrow keys to move up and down, enter to go into options, escape to cancel back out of them, or enter to confirm our selection. The first one, you'll be selecting your language. Some of them aren't completely translated and may have lots of English left in them. I'll just be using English anyways. Mirrors, I'll choose mirror region, and we'll select the closest location to us to download packages from. This will make the installation process much faster. I'm in South Africa, so I'll use the arrow keys to navigate down to it and hit spacebar to select. You can select multiple here or unselect them. I'll hit enter, then back, and locales will be checking if everything is correct. Your keyboard layout, as well as language and encoding you can leave as is. It's mainly just your keyboard layout, which there's quite a few, and your language. In my case, it'll just be English US. I'll head back. Disk configuration is where we tell the Arch installer to install Arch. I'll use best effort and choose a partition to put it on. You can of course manually partition if you want to overwrite or create new partitions, etc. But the first option should be good for most people if you're just installing this in an empty partition or overwriting an existing one. If you're planning to dual boot with Windows, in Windows, I'd recommend opening up the partition manager, shrinking your Windows drive, and just leaving a bunch of empty space. Remember the size, come back to here in the installer, simply scroll down to it using the arrow keys and hit enter to select it. Then we'll choose a partition type. I'll choose ext4, which you should as well, and we'll leave yes default. That's it. Disk encryption you can skip over unless you want to encrypt your hard drive, say you're using a laptop and taking it to public places. Bootloader you can leave as systemd. Otherwise, if you're having issues with dual booting with Windows or the install process, etc., in here you can most likely leave it as systemd. The only reason you may want to change it is if you prefer something else, or you're experiencing weird niche issues like dual booting with Windows and the installation process is having some weird errors. If it does, check your BIOS to make sure Intel Rapid Storage technology isn't turned on if it's giving you any issues. You can select AHCI SATA mode instead, which is the older default way. Otherwise, if you're having issues with that or don't want to play around with that, just choose Grub and you'll be fine. Systemd is the default here, and I'd recommend this if you're gonna only use Arch on your system and not dual boot with Windows. Unified kernel images you can leave as no, the default. Swap you can leave enabled, which I would recommend. Hostname you can set the hostname for your system. It can be anything you want, such as maybe Arch VM in my case. Otherwise, if you're planning on hosting a website for it, make sure it matches the domain, such as techno.co. Root password is your admin password, make it super strong, and if it's not, it'll warn you. I don't really care about it, so I'll enter a simple password there. Then user account. We'll be making your user account that you log in with, or multiple. Add a user, we'll type in a name, in my case, Techno, enter, give a password, give it a second time, and I'll leave it as the default option here to give this account access to sudo so it can run admin commands. You can add multiple accounts, edit existing ones, or confirm and exit. Then profile, followed by type. You'll be telling what you want the Arch installer to set up. If you're using a server, desktop is the default. You can install a window manager such as KDE, GNOME, etc. Minimal to do everything from the command line, which I wouldn't recommend. Server, if you're going to be connecting to this over the internet and hosting an Nginx web server, etc., or even Xorg. The default should be desktop if you're installing this on your PC. That's it. When you do so, you'll be given a bunch of different options. These are all different desktop environments. The one I'd recommend is KDE, as it works with most things. It's super easy to customize, etc. But things like Cinnamon is also relatively easy and pretty compatible with lots of things. And you have some weird ones like i3, for example, which is a window manager more than a desktop environment, so you basically manage your Windows with your keyboard. Anyway, KDE is the simplest, I'll choose that. Then graphics driver, a new option. If you have desktop selected, hit enter here, and you'll be choosing Nvidia if you're using an Nvidia graphics card. I'd recommend choosing proprietary to use the latest Nvidia drivers. Otherwise, if you're sure you want open source drivers, you can choose them here as well. Intel and AMD are also available here. Otherwise, if you're using a virtual machine, just leave it as all open source, or VMware/VirtualBox if you're using those instead. Then Greeter, you can leave as SDDM unless you know what you're doing. Then audio. Simply choose Pipewire for the default. Otherwise, Pulse Audio, I think, gives you a bit more customizability. Of course, you can change things like this later on. Kernel. We're given a few options. Linux, which is the bleeding edge. Linux Hardened, which I think has more security options. Linux LTS, which should be less prone to bugs and things like that, more tried and tested. And Zen, I'm not entirely too sure of. Linux is what I'll be choosing here for the bleeding edge with the latest technology. Additional packages, you should only use this if you want to install certain things while it's installing. For example, I can install Firefox, space to enter a different thing, and I'll enter NeoFetch here. This is just so you don't have to install it. When you get into the OS, it's installed for you in this process here. Hit enter to confirm, and once it's verified, it'll continue. Network configuration, simply choose Network Manager here. Time zone, you'll be selecting your time zone. To search, hit the / key and start typing. I am in Africa, Johannesburg, so I'll select that here. Enter. NTP, leave this enabled to automatically set the time based off of the internet, and optional repositories, you can enable some of these here if you so wish. I'll be skipping them. Finally, save configuration if you'd like to install this on multiple different systems. Otherwise, just choose install. Then enter to continue. That's it. It'll format and start installing Arch. It's as simple as that. Now, while this is installing, if you'd like to set this up in your own system, you'll need to download the ISO and either burn it to a USB, copy it to a USB using something like Ventoy, or mount it if you're going to be using a virtual machine. I'll be going through all of those now. First of all, you'll need the installation media. archlinux.org/download. You can download the Arch Linux ISO file through BitTorrent here. Otherwise, scrolling down, you have some direct downloads where you can find different servers worldwide. Simply pick the one that's closest to you and download it from there. There's tons of them. When you have it, you can either use a tool like Bootloader Etcher or Rufus in order to burn it to a USB, or of course, if you're a serious power user, you could use something like Ventoy to have multiple ISOs on one USB. Not needing to burn it each time, you can simply just copy the ISO file to a separate partition on the USB and choose what to boot from when you plug it into your PC. If you're going the virtual machine route, simply open up the software. In my case, Hyper-V. I'll create a new machine, give it a name, such as Arch. I'll install it to a different location, and once we've selected it, we'll choose Generation 2 in Hyper-V, give it some memory. I'll turn off dynamic, and I'll give it 8 GB. Then I'll connect it to the internet, and with everything else as is, on the next tab, I'll choose to install the image, browse, and select the correct ISO file. Next, and that's it. Once it's created, if your virtual machine software, like Hyper-V, has a few options, we'll open up settings and double check a few things. First of all, make sure it has quite a few processes just to speed everything up, enough memory, and in my case, I'll make sure that Secure Boot is disabled here. Then I can connect and start it. Simply choose the first option, and there we go. Then when you reach this screen here, the installation is complete. Choose no. Otherwise, if you accidentally choose yes, simply type exit as such and hit enter. Either way, you'll see installation completed without any errors. You may now reboot. Simply type reboot, hit enter, and your system will restart. When it's done, you'll be prompted to log in, enter your password, and KDE Plasma will load, or of course the desktop environment you chose. You can skip through the introduction, and there we go. We're now successfully using Arch Linux. The installation really is that simple. Obviously, you'd want to check your settings, customize your install, and if you haven't already, select the correct desktop resolution. Sweet, that's really it. Oh, and also, not to mention, opening up terminal, NeoFetch, Arch, by the way. Hopefully you found this video useful. Thank you for watching. My name's been Troubleshoot, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao.